Leader of Third Party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to speak to the motion on the order paper and the recommendations of that motion to put names to the select standing committees. I recognize it is not typical for a member to speak to this report. However, it is a debatable motion. But unlike so many other motions and reports, we tend to have a very pro forma, scripted response to moving these through the House. I'd like to point out to Mr. Speaker and to the House that under Standing Order 68.1, which provides for the select standing or permanent committees of the Legislative Assembly, all select standing committees are appointed on a sessional basis at the start of each session of a parliament. This is not up to the Premier's office. This is a standing order that we use to guide our work in this House. Given where we are at, I do think it is important that comments are made about the approach to committees in this House, to the membership of those committees, to our expectation of the work that those committees do, and to how that work is valued by governments. We are a parliamentary democracy. The first bill passed at the beginning of each session is the Act to ensure the supremacy of Parliament, essentially a piece of legislation that gives, quote, the right of the Legislative Assembly to give precedence to matters other than those expressed by the Sovereign. As is pointed out in the legislation, this dates back to the reign of Elizabeth I. As an assertion of independence from the Crown for the purposes of legislation, I will note that this very clearly states Parliament, not government. Government consists of the cabinet members. Parliament is all of the members elected as representatives for our communities. We are not here to just witness or to just vote or to just oppose. We are each of us here as representatives with duties and responsibilities as legislators, and I would suggest that we should always be asking ourselves, how do we serve better? I'm going to point to some comments made by George McMinn in a 1982 report on committees. He said, one must consider the benefits of a well-designed committee system as follows. Parliament is brought closer to the people by allowing submissions and representations by individuals and groups to be made directly to the members of the Legislative Assembly. Committees provide a forum which tend to minimize the adversary system or confrontation syndrome typical of all large chambers, thereby leading to more earnest examination of matters with correspondingly less politicking. Committees are facilitate detailed consideration of legislation and estimates. They permit examination of witnesses when necessary, enables two or more arms of the legislative body to proceed with House business simultaneously, provide an effective method of bringing members of the legislature and the bureaucracy together, and would therefore tend to introduce a new concept to government decision-making, bureaucratic responsibility. On a day when we are absolutely united in our respect and concern for democracy, Honourable Speaker, I think that we should be continually asking ourselves, how do we make sure that we are upholding the most important values of democracy? What we do here should not just be theatre or performance. Members say over and over again, indeed my colleague walked in today after his committee meeting and said, this is the work I am most proud of. When we work in committees, we work together as elected representatives. We work in service. We have had an all-party approach to review health regulations in this province. We have had an all-party committee to make recommendations for regulating ride-hailing. We have had the BC Wild Salmon Advisory Council. We can surely recognize that while we are dealing with so many overlapping crises, there hardly seems to be an argument against bringing the members of this House together to work collaboratively in a nonpartisan way to urgently recommend solutions that will be supported by all three caucuses. Considering the drug poisoning crisis and the call that the leader of the official opposition and I have made for over a year to bring this House together in a committee to look at the urgent solutions that can be implemented to try to prevent the deaths of 7 people a day. I say that it is not enough, Honourable Speaker, to simply put names on these select standing committees, which our predecessors have indicated are meant to be a part of the legislative work of this House, not as something that just gets named and then left and nothing happens. We have not had a health committee since 2017, but I will point out that the work of the previous health committee was formidable, was commendable, actually should have been a roadmap that should have been used for the last 5 years in this province. Because had it been, we might not be seeing the level of death and loss that we are seeing as a result of the poison drug crisis today. I'm going to point out that of the 59 recommendations of the previous health committee and all-party committee, two-party committee at the time, that worked for 3 years, its final recommendation, number 59, support and expand evidence-based initiatives or programs for safe and controlled access to currently illicit substances. In 2017, a committee of this House recommended to government that we move forward with safe supply as a means to end the deaths. It is not enough to simply put names on these committees. It is not enough to simply have these committees gather. These committees are the work of democracy and this body of the legislature, and I would ask that this government and this assembly recognize the absolutely integral part of democracy that exists in these committees and to empower them to do the good work that they must do and then use them as guidance, as is meant to be. We are 87 representatives in here, not 24. And so I will close my comments, Honourable Speaker, gratefully to you for allowing me this time to speak to this and to say, let us show our commitment to democracy by using the democratic tools that have been fought for by our predecessors for hundreds of years, not to shrug them off, not to think of them as performance, but to recognize that all of us come here in service, and all of us improve that service when we work together.